And as the silence wraps around you like velvet, something within you stirs, not loud, not urgent, but deep. As if the very center of your being has been touched by a whisper older than time. You've assumed the state, you've entered the scene, you've felt it real, and now nothing seems to move. The world, unchanged. The phone doesn't ring, the message doesn't come, the body still aches, the bank account still waits, but beneath the surface of appearances, something ancient is already unfolding. For what happens after assumption is not seen with eyes, it is sensed in stillness. The outer world appears unmoved, but the seed has been planted in the unseen, and it is law. It cannot fail. Most look to the world for confirmation, but the world is always a reflection, never a cause. You assumed the state. You took your attention away from the facts, and rested it in the end. You touched the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and now the husk of the old must give way to the birth of the new. But birth, you see, is a sacred thing, hidden, protected, wrapped in silence. The moment you assumed, you moved, not through space, but through states. The whole of creation reshuffled itself to meet you in your new dwelling. You may not see the furniture move, but the walls are no longer the same. The old conversations lose their hold. The mirror begins to reflect what it once could not. You do not chase the manifestation. You become the version of you for whom it is already done. And yet, your senses may rebel. They may scream. Nothing has changed. And this is the temptation, to look again, to doubt, to dig up the seed before it can take root. But the invisible is more real than the seen. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. When you assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, you marry yourself to the unseen, and like a bride awaiting her beloved, you do not question if he will come. You prepare the home, you light the candles, you dwell in readiness. This is the invisible process, not idle waiting, but inner alignment. You become the embodiment of what you have chosen. You think from it, not of it, and the world begins to bend. You will notice subtle shifts, not signs, but echoes. A friend says a phrase you just imagined. A song plays with your answer hidden in the lyrics. A memory comes that feels different now. These are not accidents, they are the ripples of consciousness forming shape. But do not chase the ripples. Stay in the center of the stillness. Stay married to the state. The moment you assumed it, the pattern was set. The path is now beneath your feet, though it may appear hidden in fog. Every step forward will appear just as you are ready to take it. You are not manifesting things. You are remembering who you are. You are the operant power. This is not a belief to hold. It is a truth to be lived. When you assume a state, you are not asking God to give. You are claiming your place as God in motion. Imagination is the father, feeling is the mother, and your world is the child of that union. There is no delay in spirit. The delay is only in perception. What feels like waiting is often just the mind adjusting to the new frequency. It must be still long enough to perceive what has already been given. Feel the rhythm of this moment. No effort, no struggle, just the breath, soft and circular, just the awareness of your inner scene, alive and fulfilled. This is the Sabbath, the rest that follows assumption, the inner stillness that declares, it is done. You need not speak it again. You need not plead or rehearse. To do so is to forget that it has already been planted. You would not water a seed with panic. You would not dig up soil to hurry it along. You would trust the unseen workings beneath. So it is with your assumption. The gestation has begun. Time is merely the measure of its unfolding. And as you rest in this inner knowing, something remarkable begins to happen. Not outside, but within. The mind quiets. The heart opens. The world softens its edges, and the old identity begins to dissolve like mist at dawn. But what if the old self still lingers in shadows? What if the echo of what was still rings loud in your inner ear? That brings us to what most never realize about assumption. The echo of what was still rings loud in your inner ear, not because it has power, but because it is familiar. The old self lingers, not as truth, but as habit, a shadow cast by the light of your new becoming. And in this space, after the assumption, but before the unfolding, lies the sacred tension, a holy stillness, where two worlds brush shoulders, the remembered and the real. You feel the pull of your old name. It calls with the voice of evidence, of memory, of what others still see in you. But the unseen has no need for validation. The new self, the one who dwells in the fulfilled desire, it does not argue with what was. It simply is. This is why so many turn back. They assume the state. Yes, they feel it once. They glimpse the mountaintop. But then they look back. Like Lot's wife, They glance at the city they left behind, and the forward movement still. No man, having put his hand to the plow, and looking back, fit for the kingdom of God, not because he is unworthy, but because his gaze, his attention, his state, is divided. You are not here to repeat the past. You are here to redeem it, to revise it, from a new dwelling place in consciousness. The moment you assumed, the old version of you began to lose its home, but it will not go quietly. It will knock, it will whisper, it will present familiar thoughts, dressed in new clothes. It will tempt you to doubt, to wonder, to ask, is it really done? But notice this, the question only arises because something has already shifted. The soil of your mind is stirring. The old identity knows its time is short, and so it cries out, not because it has strength, but because it is being cast out. So do not fight it. Do not resist. Simply recognize it is not you. It is memory echoing through an empty hall. Your true self is seated in the end, secure in the fulfillment. Your job is not to silence every old thought, but to refuse to feed it. The flame of assumption burns quietly, but completely. As you persist in the state, the shadow fades. Feel this now, not as information, but as remembrance. Let it settle. You are not who you were. That self may still appear in the mirror, but it no longer defines you. You live from the inner man, not the outer shell, and this inner man is eternal, unshakable, pure imagination, wearing your form. What follows assumption is not always loud or fast. It is not always thunderclaps and instant change. Often it is a soft rearranging, a new tone in your voice, a different response to an old trigger, a sudden aversion to what once pleased you. These are the tremors of your world bending inward, matching your new state. You are not waiting for manifestation. You are remembering that it is already yours. You are not looking to be chosen. You are awakening to the truth that you are the chooser, the operant power, the very word made flesh. There will be moments of quiet grief, too, not because something is lost, but because something false is dying. You may feel the tenderness of letting go, the ache of detaching from identities that once kept you safe. Let them go. Mourn them like old clothes, worn familiar, but no longer fitting. This is the holy in-between, not a void, but a womb, not delay, but gestation. And the more you rest in it, the more you trust the unseen, the more swiftly and effortlessly the external follows. The world must conform. It has no choice, for it is your mirror, and your face has changed. So when doubt comes, and it will welcome it, not as truth, but as proof that something new is being born, let it pass through, like wind across a still lake. Do not react. Do not pass. Return to the end. Dwell in the feeling. Speak from the state. And soon the very structure of your life will rearrange itself around that unseen inner word. You don't make it happen. You become it. And as you do, something else begins to stir. Subtle, yet undeniable. The bridge of incidents. Those sacred threads of circumstance that lead from the unseen to the seen. And those sacred threads of circumstance begin weaving themselves into view, not as grand gestures or flashing signs, but as quiet invitations, moments that shimmer with a strange familiarity, as though you've lived them before. The bridge of incidents forms not by your effort, but by your being. It rises to meet the state you inhabit, responding to the vibration of your inner world, without needing your conscious interference. This bridge is not built by logic. It does not always follow the path your mind expects. In fact, it almost never does. It bends through the ordinary, cloaking the miraculous in what seems mundane, a chance encounter, a delayed message, a cancelled plan. And yet each step, though veiled, is precise, an orchestration of infinite wisdom, rearranging the seen to match the unseen. Do not look for the bridge. Walk in faith. The moment you assume the end, it began. Your only task is to remain. Remain in the feeling, in the knowing, in the identity of the fulfilled. Do not attempt to plan or push. The human mind wishes to take over, to decide how it should happen, when it should come, who should deliver it. But the bridge is never built from control. It is walked in surrender. Imagine now that each breath you take affirms the end. Each ordinary day, with all its routines and rhythms, is now the very fabric of divine unfolding. Feel how sacred it becomes when you no longer seek to make it happen, but simply let it. The bridge may take you through unfamiliar places. It may unsettle what once felt stable. It may release you from people, patterns, or possessions that cannot travel with you. and at first this may feel like loss, but loss is the illusion. Nothing real is ever taken, only the false falls away. The shell breaks so the seed can sprout. As the path reveals itself, be watchful not with eyes of fear, but with the eyes of remembrance. This is your world, bending itself to reflect who you now are. What may seem random or delayed is only the reordering of the field. You've stepped into a new pattern, and the old must dissolve for the new to emerge. There is a holy intelligence behind every unfolding. Even apparent setbacks are servants of the assumption. Even silence is filled with movement. The bridge is never still, for consciousness never sleeps. You may notice a sudden stirring within, an urge to act, to call, to change direction. If it arises from peace, follow it. If it feels forced or anxious, return to stillness. Inspired action is different from reaction. It bubbles from the deep, not from fear or frustration. When it is time to move, you will know, because it will feel like remembering. This is not passive waiting. This is living in the end. This is walking, as if already fulfilled. You brush your teeth, not as someone trying to manifest health, but as one already radiant. You rise in the morning, not as one hoping to be loved, but as one already chosen. Every motion becomes a sacred echo of the assumption you can. The bridge forms not before you assume, but because you have. And so the world, like soft clay, begins to yield. People say what they've never said. Opportunities find you without your chase. The very laws that seemed fixed begin to bend under the hand of your new identity. You are not causing miracles. You are witnessing the natural consequence of spiritual law. It shall not return unto me void, but it shall accomplish that which I please. That which you have claimed within cannot remain hidden. It must find its echo in form, for the law is perfect, and you are the law in motion. Trust the bridge. Though the steps are hidden, the outcome is assured. You walk not to arrive, but to embody. The world merely catches up with what you already are, and as you begin to walk with this awareness, with this gentle certainty, something even more subtle begins to rise within you. Not just faith in the unfolding, but a deeper recognition, a remembering of something you had long forgotten. What if the true transformation was never the thing that comes, but the one who remembers they never lacked it? The one who remembers they never lacked it begins to rise, quietly, from beneath the layers of seeking, not with fanfare or fireworks, but with the hush of sacred knowing. You do not become worthy of the desire. You realize you already were. You do not chase the manifestation. You awaken to the self for whom it was always inevitable. And in that dawning light, you begin to sense the deeper current, that this was never about getting what you wanted, but about shedding what you were never meant to carry. The longing was the signal. The assumption was the portal. But the real alchemy happens here, in the recognition that your very being is the fulfillment. You are not incomplete, waiting for life to fix you. You are life remembering itself. When you assume the wish fulfilled, you are not drawing something toward you. You are aligning with your truest rhythm, the sound of your own name, whispered through the chambers of eternity. Desire was never outside you. It was planted by the self that already dwells in its fulfillment. The moment you desired it, it existed, not as a potential, but as a completed fact in imagination. And imagination is not idle fact. It is the divine substance, the first cause, the Alpha and the Omega wrapped in silence. So let go of the waiting posture. Let go of the striving. You do not stand before a locked door, knocking. You are the door. You are the key. You are the open way. To live in the end is to return to yourself. And from this place, all things are added, not earned, not attracted, but revealed. Think now of what you once sought so desperately. The love, the healing, the clarity. Notice how still it becomes when you stop reaching. The noise of want falls away, and what remains? A peace so quiet, it almost startles you. This is the peace that passeth all understanding, the stillness that speaks louder than proof. For you no longer ask if it will come. You no longer measure time or trace results. You know, and in that knowing, you carry the fragrance of the fulfilled. Others may not see it yet, but they will feel it. Circumstances may not have changed, but they will obey. For the outer always yields to the inner, and the inner is now rooted in completion. This is the invisible process, not a line of action, but a shift of identity, not a method, but a memory, of who you were before the veil, of the God self that never doubted, never desired, never feared, because it lacked nothing, it simply was. And this God Self is not distant, it is not reserved for the few or the devout, it is your own I am. It has worn your face all along. You look out through its eyes, you speak with its voice, and as you assume the feeling of your desire fulfilled, you step into its rhythm. You speak not from hope, but from embodiment. You move not to become, but because you already are. This is why assumption is not pretending, it is not play acting or wishing, it is a return to origin, a choosing of truth over appearances. When you say, I am, you create. When you feel, it is done, you call forth that which has always been. Be still in this, let it wash over you. No need to grasp or repeat, just breathe as the one who already is. Think from the state, speak from the state, rest in the tone of the fulfilled, and let the world echo back the frequency of your chosen self. And yet even as the new settles in, you may find another question rising from the quiet, a holy curiosity, gentle but persistent. If this is all within, if the outer world is simply reflection, then who, really, are the people around you? What role do they play in this divine unfolding? And that gentle curiosity begins to unfurl, like a leaf awakening to light. If all is within, if every event bends to the shape of your inner state, then what of them, the people, the faces, the voices that populate your world? Who are they truly, in the vast stillness of your unfolding? Are they separate wills, with their own intentions, or are they roles in the dream your imagination casts? To see clearly, you must see spiritually. You must look beyond bodies, beyond words, beyond past memories. For every person you encounter is not who they appear to be, but who you assume them to be. They are not fixed. They are fluid, malleable, mirrors of the inner man you choose to occupy. This is not to diminish their divinity. No, it is to reveal it. All are one. All are expressions of the same being, playing out different aspects of your state. I and my Father are one. And so when you shift, they shift. When you change your concept of self, their behavior, their presence, aligns accordingly, without them even knowing why. They are not obstacles to your assumption, they are instruments of it. Perhaps you assumed wealth, and a stranger suddenly offers help, where before there was none. Perhaps you assumed love, and the one who once seemed distant now reaches for you with tenderness. Perhaps you assumed healing, and the physician who had no answers is now guided by insight. None of these are coincidences. They are echoes of the state you live in. And just as a mirror cannot reflect what you do not present, people cannot show you what you have not first claimed within. Do not ask them to change. Do not beg them to understand. Instead, ascend in consciousness. Dwell in the version of you where harmony already exists, and they, without knowing how, will meet you there. You may notice it even with those long estranged. They reach out, their tone softens, or perhaps they fade quietly from your life, making room for new reflections. All is arranged with a grace beyond comprehension. The world, though it seems vast and external, is contained within you, not metaphorically, but literally. The whole drama plays within imagination, and imagination is God. There is no other cause, no outer power, no independent agent of fortune or delay. Your assumptions cast the roles, write the lines, and orchestrate the curtain's rise. You are not a character waiting on direction. You are the playwright, the actor, the stage, and the light. So if someone in your world seems hardened, cold, unkind, do not resist them. Revise them, not in words, but in feeling. Enter the scene where they are already what you desire them to be. Hear their voice changed, see their face softened, and then let it go, not to make it happen, but because it is. This is the divine responsibility, to know that no one can be to you what you have not first been to yourself in consciousness. And so you forgive, not as an act of moral virtue, but as a return to creative innocence. You release the old scene, and with it, the old self who created it. And from this sacred forgiveness, something beautiful unfolds, not just change in others, but a deeper love for them, a recognition that they too are you, wearing another mask. They are the echo of your inner conversations, the reflections of your hidden beliefs, the living proof that imagination indeed creates reality. Let this soften you. Let it still your desire to fix, to argue, to plead. If someone is against you, assume harmony. If someone is silent, assume connection.
If someone is blind to your truth, assume they now see. You are not at their mercy. You are the mercy, the source, the unseen cause blooming into form. And when you walk the earth with this awareness, that all others are cast from your inner script, then nothing can shake you. No rejection wounds, no delay discourages, for you know it all bends to your assumption. It always has. But this brings us closer to a deeper mystery, one few dare to face. If every figure is shaped by your state, then who have you been in your silent conversations? What voice do you rehearse when no one hears? And that question rests in the silence, like a candle flickering in the unseen. What voice do you rehearse when no one hears? In the quiet corridors of your mind, when the world has gone dim, and no eyes remain upon you, who do you speak as? To whom do you speak? And from what inner place does your voice arise? These are the conversations that sculpt your world. Most imagine that assumption is a single act, a moment of intensity, a vivid scene played once and sealed. But the deeper truth is that assumption is carried not just in vision, but in repetition, in the gentle echo of your inner dialogue. For you are always communing with yourself. Even now, beneath your breath, a conversation continues, and the law is not mocked. Whatsoever a man soweth in these silent places, that shall he also reap. You may affirm beauty with your words, but if your inner speech calls you unworthy, the reflection will not lie. You may speak of abundance outwardly, but if in secret you rehearse fear, tighten at bills, speak lack in thought, then lack will bloom like thorns in your field. Not because you are wrong, not because you are wrong, not because you are judged, but because imagination listens, and it does not discriminate. It gives according to your seed. Every word spoken within you is a seed, and the moment it is accepted by feeling, it falls into fertile soil. You may forget it by morning, but it has already taken root, and unless revised, it must bear fruit. So listen now, gently, without judgment. Become aware of the tone you carry, when you are not performing, when you are not manifesting, when you are simply being. Is it love? Is it certainty? Is it peace? Or is it doubt wrapped in polite phrases? Fear dressed as planning? Unworthiness masked by effort? You cannot assume a new life, and carry on old conversations. They are incompatible. The new wine will break the old wineskin. Your inner speech must match the self you now claim to be. Not perfectly, not obsessively, but faithfully, like a quiet flame kept alive by breath. Imagine now, the inner world made clean. Imagine every corridor, echoing with the voice of the fulfilled. You walk, and your thoughts affirm your wholeness. You stumble, and the voice within says, even this serves me. You are delayed, and the voice whispers, only a blessing rearranged. This is the holy work, not endless outer action, but the daily revision of the inner tone, to speak as the one who already has, to think as the one who already is, to correct yourself not with shame, but with remembrance. That is not my voice anymore. I no longer say such things to myself. I dwell in truth now. And what is truth? That you are already complete, that nothing is denied you, that the kingdom is within. Let the weak say I am strong, not because he feels strong, but because he knows. By saying it, he becomes it. Your word is law unto your own being. What you continue to say in secret becomes the law of your day. So let the secret place be holy again. Make it sacred by tending it with love. When fear arises, don't rehearse it, revise it. When bitterness whispers, don't host it, replace it. Speak what is lovely, speak what is done, speak as the God you are, and you will find the world softening in return. The difficult person now speaks gently. The door that stayed shut now swings open, not because you forced it, but because you changed the one who knocks. All relationships are reflections of this inner dialogue. Your partner speaks with the tone you hold of them. Your boss reacts to the identity you silently assume when you walk into the room. The world does not respond to effort, it responds to assumption, and assumption is carried in every unguarded word you speak within. Let it be gentle, let it be kind, let it be firm in the knowing of who you are. And as you begin to walk through the days with this sacred awareness of your inner voice as the shaping force, you may begin to notice something even more extraordinary. Not just that the world listens to you, but that even time itself seems to listen. What if what you call delay is not delay at all, but your inner self rehearsing the wrong script? What if time is not against you, but waiting for your voice to match the end?
And if time is only waiting for your voice to match the end, then time is no longer your master, but your servant. It does not rush you nor punish you. It holds space for you, patiently echoing the assumptions you whisper in silence. Delay is not denial. Delay is mercy, allowing you to become fully who you say you are before the world reflects it without resistance. Most call it waiting, but waiting implies absence. In truth, it is incubation, a season of inner alignment where all that is unlike your assumption is brought to the surface, not to discourage you, but to be released, to be cleansed. You are not being tested, you are being attuned. And so, when nothing seems to happen, when days pass and outer life appears unchanged, remember, this is not stagnation, it is the clay softening under the potter's hands. You are not forgotten, you are being readied. Every repetition of the inner word, every quiet return to the end, presses your image deeper into the field, and the field never forgets. There is no distance in imagination. There is only the appearance of time, bending to the rhythm of your new identity. When you fully occupy the state of the one who already has, time begins to contract. You feel it in subtle ways. Synchronicities cluster, delays dissolve, and what once seemed far arrives through unexpected channels. But here is the holy paradox. The more you rest in the end without watching the clock, the faster the bridge forms. For time speeds up only when you no longer ask how long. You are not rewarded for patience. You are invited into surrender. Surrender is not giving up. It is giving over, handing the mechanics to the deeper self, the divine imagination, who already knows the way. He that believeth shall not make haste. You no longer try to rush the unfolding. You become still enough to feel it blooming from within. Imagine now the roots spreading beneath the soil. You cannot see them, but they are growing, anchoring, gathering strength. When the fruit appears, it is not the beginning, it is the final whisper of a process long complete. So it is with assumption. What seems like a sudden breakthrough is only the outer acknowledgement of an identity you've already lived inwardly 1,000 times. Do not measure the unseen with visible metrics. Do not look to the clock, the calendar, the opinions of others. None of these things can chart your becoming. The only real question is, where are you dwelling now? Not physically, but spiritually. Are you still asking for the thing, or are you already living as the one who possesses it? To live in the end is to collapse time, not by force, but by remembrance. You are eternal. Time bends around your state, and when you assume a thing done, time bows in response. It must yield. The promise is not delayed. The witness is being prepared. Notice the subtle shift in you as this truth settles deeper. Feel how the breath becomes slower, the heart less hurried. You are not behind. You are not late. You have not missed anything. There is only now, and now is always the perfect entry point into fulfillment. And when you begin to feel time no longer pressing against you, but flowing through you, then everything changes. Urgency fades. Desperation dissolves. The anxiety of when falls silent, and into that silence enters the presence of what is already yours. This is how the invisible becomes visible, not through strain, but through agreement. Not through striving, but through agreement. Not through striving, but through being. When your inner speech, your feeling, your rhythm matches the end, the scene must conform. Not eventually, not if you do it right, but inevitably. This is not theory, this is law. And yet even as you begin to live from the end, and time bends beneath your feet, another invitation quietly emerges, not from lack, not from fear, but from divine curiosity. If all things bend to the state you occupy, then what if you could revise not just your present but your past? What if even memory were not fixed, but pliable and holy? And if memory too is not fixed, then the entire tapestry of your life becomes available, not to escape, but to redeem. The past, once thought to be carved in stone, reveals itself to be soft clay in the hands of imagination. And the moment you see this, a sacred power awakens, the power to revise. You are not bound by what was. You are not defined by events, reactions, or wounds. They are not permanent. They are echoes of a state once held. And just as you can assume a new outcome, you can reimagine what seemed unchangeable. For the past lives not behind you, but within you, and within, all things are subject to change. To revise is to forgive, and to forgive is to recreate. It is not denial, it is divine authorship. You are not erasing what happened. You are selecting the version of it that reflects your highest truth. You are saying, that may have been what I saw, but it is not what I now accept. And so the former things pass away. Take a moment and feel into this gently. Recall a scene, not to dwell in it, but to lift it. Something that once pained you, even subtly, a moment of rejection, a word spoken in anger, an opportunity missed. See it now as if upon a stage, dimly lit, and now, breathe light into it. Let the outcome change. Let the conversation shift. Hear the words you wish had been spoken, see the face soften, feel the self you were in that moment, receive what you truly needed, peace, clarity, love, restoration. Let it saturate the memory until the very feeling changes. This is not imagination's game, this is imagination's law, for you are the only operant power, and what you revise in imagination is received by the deeper self as reality. The subconscious does not argue, it accepts, it embodies, and your world, without explanation, begins to reflect the new truth. There may be no immediate sign, you may wake tomorrow, and everything appears unchanged, but beneath the surface, the roots shift. The bitterness dissolves, the fear quiets, and in its place, a new pattern grows. You may find relationships soften without cause. You may find opportunities arrive, as if from nowhere. You may even find the memory itself becomes distant, as though it belonged to someone else entirely, because it did. You are not the you who experienced that pain. That version of self dissolved the moment you revised it. And now, a new self stands in its place, one who knows only the revised scene, and acts from it without effort. This is the gift of revision. It frees the past, and with it, the future. Jesus said, "Your sins are forgiven you, go, and sin no more." Not because punishment was removed, but because identity was transformed. Forgiveness is revision. It is the refusal to continue dragging the shadow of a moment into the light of now. You do not justify it. You do not retell it. You simply choose again. Let this truth settle in your being. Let it quiet the mind and open the heart. You are not at the mercy of old stories. You are the storyteller, and the story changes when you no longer feed what once wounded you. Your inner man has no scars, only the echoes of what you believed. And this belief, this internal selection, is the seed of every future you'll know. So as you walk in your assumption, do not leave the past untouched. Let it be cleansed in light. Let it be reshaped in love. The self that lives from the wish fulfilled does not carry regret. It carries revelation. It looks upon every scene with eyes of dominion, knowing, this too, is mine to transform. And when this becomes your natural response, to revise instead of relive, to forgive instead of explain, you step into a new rhythm altogether. Time no longer folds behind you like a trail of proof. It bends inward, turning past and future into a present of endless becoming. But as you revise and rise into this light, a deeper question may begin to stir, not about the past, but about the very nature of the world itself. If all is you pushed out, then where, truly, is God? And what exactly is the world made of? And if the world is yourself pushed out, then it cannot be separate, it cannot be other, it cannot oppose the one who dreams it. And so, the question ripens in silence. If all is projection, if all is shaped by inner movement, then what is this world made of? And where does God dwell within it? The answer comes not in thunder, but in stillness. It does not shout, it unfolds. This world, the one you touch, walk through, name as real, is consciousness made visible. There is no substance but awareness, no form but thought clothed in texture. What appears solid is simply your inner state cast in shadow and light. You are not in the world is in you. In the beginning was the Word, not a sound, but a vibration, a thought tinged with feeling. That word took shape. That shape became flesh, and you have lived within the echo of it ever since, believing the echo was separate, not knowing you were the Word all along. There is no objective matter, there is only the arrangement of awareness. When you assume a state, the world adjusts, not by magic, but by law. The people, places and circumstances that appear out there are shaped by the tone you carry within, not sometimes, always. This is not poetic suggestion, it is spiritual physics. Look around you now, not with your eyes, but with your knowing. Every texture of your life reflects an inner script. The conversations you hear mirror the ones you rehearse in silence. The opportunities or lack thereof match your self-concept. Even delays, even rejections, all are answers to unconscious questions, unspoken prayers made in the language of assumption. Nothing opposes you but your own divided attention. To unify yourself, you must recognize the substance of reality, and the substance is imagination. The very faculty you once dismissed as child's play is the creative power of God. It is the forge of every world, the womb of every experience. You do not need to convince it, coax it, or beg it to work. You need only use it, wisely, consciously, faithfully. You have been imagining since birth, but now, you imagine with direction. Now you assume with understanding, and the world becomes your canvas, not your judge.
Feel how this frees you. No longer must you wait on the opinions of others. No longer must you strive to meet invisible standards. You are the standard. You are the standard. You are the cause, and your world will never rise above the image you hold of yourself. To change the image is to change the outpicturing, not by effort, but by inner alignment. You no longer try to fix the outer world like a broken machine. You ascend in consciousness, and the machine reconfigures itself. The world is clay. You are the potter. You are both breath and vessel, both dreamer and dream. And the closer you draw to this realization, the thinner the veil becomes. God, then, is not elsewhere. God is not looking down. God is not waiting above for your good behavior. Be still, and know that I am God. The I am in you is the one, the creative principle, the eternal flame, and when you say I am, you ignite that flame into form. So let the world reflect your awakened knowing. Let it show you your assumption, not with judgment, but with clarity. If you do not like what you see, you do not curse the mirror, you change the face. You dwell in a new state, and the mirror must obey. This is not wishful thinking, this is divine order. And yet even in this power, this holy recognition of yourself as cause, there arises a quieter longing, not just to create, but to remember, not just to manifest new things, but to return to your origin, to remember what it felt like to live not as a seeker, but as the source. What if assumption is not a tool, but a return? What if you've never been separate from the kingdom, but only asleep to it, and now the dream is thinning, and the light is beginning to seep through the edges? And if the light is beginning to seep through the edges, then perhaps what you called awakening is not a rising, but a remembering, not the climb towards something new, but the return to something ancient, eternal, hidden just beneath the veil of appearances. You are not discovering the truth, you are rediscovering yourself. The veil has been thin all along. What seemed like separation was only sleep and assumption. This holy act of claiming the end is the shaking off of dreams that never belonged to you. When you assume the fulfilled state, you are not just selecting a new outcome, you are slipping back into your original nature, the divine self that never lacked, never feared, never doubted. You begin to feel it, not as a concept, but as presence, a stillness behind the thoughts, a warmth beneath the breath, the I am that speaks before the sentence forms. This self does not strive, it does not reach, it simply is, and in its being, the world bends. This is what makes assumption sacred. It is not performance, it is permission. You grant yourself access to what was always yours, because you remember who you are. You are not the one seeking love, you are love, dreaming of its return. You are not the one chasing provision, you are abundance clothed in human rhythm. When you say I am, you are not describing a condition, you are activating a law, and this law does not waver, it does not sleep. It returns to you, always, the harvest of your belief. Let the weight of this fall gently upon your chest, not as pressure, but as peace. There is no striving in the kingdom, no proving, no pleasing, no external permission needed. You are the beloved already. You are seated in heavenly places, not later, not after effort, but now, in spirit, in truth. Your assumptions are not just mental exercises, they are openings in the veil, portals through which the truth of you flows back into visibility. Every time you dwell in the end, you clear another layer of sleep. You peel back the curtain, and glimpse the world not as it appears, but as it is. And what is it? A reflection, a mirror, a rehearsal of the state you occupy, but not a cold mirror, not mechanical or indifferent, a living mirror, alive with intelligence, responding to the vibration you carry. It does not merely echo your surface thoughts, it reflects your inner tone, your settled sense of self, and that tone is the music of assumption, subtle, constant, creative. So the question deepens now, not what do I want, not even what do I believe, but rather who do I assume I am, not just when you affirm, but when you wake, when you walk, when you wait, in the quiet moments, in the silence before sleep, in the pause between breaths. Do you still carry the identity of the one who lacks, who needs, who hopes, or have you begun to wear the name of the fulfilled? This shift is invisible to the world, but unmistakable to the soul. You feel it like a tuning, a gentle hum, a new gravity. Things begin to come to you, not because you reached for them, but because you stopped pretending they were far away. This is the hidden beauty of assumption. It collapses the illusion of distance. It gathers what seemed scattered. It returns the garden to your feet. For the garden was never lost, only forgotten. And now, in this remembering, you begin to walk differently, not because the path changed, but because you did. Feel the stillness now, and let it speak. Let it say what no outer voice can offer. You are already home. The thing you sought was never apart from you. The door was never locked. The gate was never closed. You only had to remember your name, and in that remembrance, something begins to shimmer behind every ordinary moment. The mailman's smile, the sound of wind against glass, the pause between heartbeats. It is all alive now. It all speaks your fulfillment. But what if the world still appears the same? What if the echo of the old story lingers in form? Then comes the deeper revelation that persistence is not resistance, it is reverence. It is trust in the law, even when appearances delay their surrender. And trust in the law, even when appearances delay their surrender, becomes the sacred fire of true transformation. You persist, not to force a result, but to affirm your position. You are not asking the world to catch up. You are standing in the end, unmoved, until the world can no longer pretend otherwise. Persistence is not repetition. It is not begging in silence. It is not the frantic rehearsal of affirmations born of doubt. Persistence is knowing, stillness. It is the quiet power of remaining in the identity you have chosen, even when nothing around you agrees. To persist is to refuse to descend, to refuse to lower your gaze back to the surface of things. It is to say, I will not look again for signs. I have seen the end within, and that is enough. Having done all, stand, not struggle, not strive, stand. Let the old forms tremble and fall. Let the dust of delay swirl around you. You know who you are now. You know what you have chosen. You know the law does not fail. So you return, gently again and again, to the state of the fulfilled. You return, not because you've left, but because the world's illusion pulls like gravity, and each return strengthens the foundation. Each return makes the new identity feel less like effort, and more like home. There is no punishment in forgetting, only an invitation to remember again. There is no judgment in wobble, only a loving hand guiding you back to the center. You are never cast out for slipping. You are called inward for stillness, and in that stillness, the world begins to recompose itself around you, not always visibly at first, not always with speed, but with certainty. It cannot do otherwise. You have assumed the state. An assumption is creation, so let the outer delay remind you of your power, not your lack. When the world echoes the old pattern, do not react, do not descend into explanation or frustration, simply smile inwardly. Ah, this is the echo of who I used to be, but I no longer feed it. I no longer believe it. I have already moved. You will be tempted to interpret silence as failure. You will be tempted to measure your success by evidence, but the law does not deal in evidence, it deals in causation. Your inner state is the seed. Your outer world is the delayed harvest. Do not ask the soil for proof before the sprout breaks through. Imagine now that you are the keeper of a sacred garden. You have planted a rare and holy seed, the assumption of your fulfilled desire. You water it daily, not with panic, but with reverence. You do not dig it up to check its progress. You do not scream at the soil for being too slow. You trust the seed to become what it was always meant to be. So it is with your consciousness. So it is with assumption. And when others question, when voices rise around you speaking of facts and reality and reason, you do not debate. You do not try to convince. You live. You breathe as the one who already has. And the world, in time, becomes too uncomfortable in its old shape, and yields to the new. Persistence is not tension, it is peace. It is relaxation into identity. It is the absence of effort that flows from full conviction. You no longer manifest to get something. You manifest because it is your nature to express. And what if it takes longer than you hoped? What if the bridge of incidents meanders, or the pieces seem slow to align? Then you smile again, inwardly, and say, this too is the path. This too is part of the perfect unfolding. You no longer panic at delay. You sanctify it. And the more you trust this pace, this divine rhythm of becoming, the more the delay dissolves into divine timing. And divine timing is never late, it is only right. But something else begins to unfold when you persist long enough, something deeper than manifestation, something more sacred than signs. You no longer just feel the desire fulfilled, you begin to forget the desire altogether, not because it is unimportant, but because it is already part of you. And this quiet dissolving reveals a mystery hidden in the heart of the law. And this quiet dissolving, this subtle vanishing of the desire itself, reveals something holy, that the truest sign of fulfillment is not the arrival of the thing, but the fading of need. You do not forget because you gave up. You forget because it has become part of you. It is no longer something to reach for. It is who you are. What was once longed for now feels natural. effortless, unremarkable, in the best and highest way, like breath, like warmth, like something you never had to earn, because it was always waiting within you. The state you assumed no longer feels like a performance, it feels like home. This is the mystery few notice, because the world teaches you to wait for outer proof, before feeling done. But in the realm of consciousness, fulfillment is inward, invisible. It is the stillness that arrives, when nothing is missing, even before the world agrees. You stop checking, you stop comparing, you stop counting days, and measuring movement. You simply live as the one who knows. The prayer is answered, not with thunder, but with forgetfulness. You forget the asking, because the answer is now your identity. And this is not neglect, it is absorption. You are absorbed into the new self, and in that absorption, desire dissolves, not from suppression, but from satisfaction. Imagine now, the feeling of no more waiting, no more hoping, no more questioning, not because something showed up, but because the question no longer makes sense. You are no longer the one who wanted, you are the one who is, and the world, ever the faithful mirror, must reflect that back. You are no longer relating to your desire as something separate. You are no longer imagining from lack, even subtly. You are not affirming to get, visualizing to receive, or hoping to be chosen. You are simply resting in what already is, and what is lives in you. It has always lived in you. The whole of creation is finished. All states already exist. You do not create the fulfillment, you select it, by occupying the consciousness of the one who already has. And once fully occupied, that state feels ordinary, familiar, even still. This is why many do not recognize the shift. They expect the fulfillment to feel grand, dramatic, electric. But the fulfilled self is calm, content. It does not strive. It does not even desire. It simply expresses. Its joy is in being, not in acquiring. So if you notice that the thing you once obsessed over now feels quiet in your mind, if you realize you no longer need to speak it daily, or search for its arrival, do not panic. You have not failed. You have arrived. The silence you feel is not absence, it is completion. The moment of true assumption is not loud. It is often unnoticed by the surface mind. It happens softly, like waking from a dream. You realize one day that the old self is gone. The one who doubted, yearned, waited, gone. In its place stands someone else entirely, a being who lives in the end so naturally, they do not even call it manifestation, they call it life. This is the ultimate gift of assumption, not the object received, but the self remembered. You assumed the wish fulfilled, and in doing so fulfilled the deeper wish to come home to yourself. And yet this homecoming is not a stopping point. It is not the end of desire, nor the death of dreams. It is the rebirth of desire as expression. It is the beginning of creation as play. When you no longer assume from need, you begin to assume from joy. You create not to complete yourself, but to reveal the infinite forms of the self you already are. And in this new place, where desire flows without attachment, where assumption arises without strain, another question begins to glow softly, within the silence. If creation is finished, and all states already exist, then what becomes of you, the one who chooses? Who are you in the face of such infinite possibility?
And if all states already exist, if every possibility is already contained within the eternal, now then who are you, the one who selects, who assumes, who moves through these infinite forms? You are not the state. You are not the desire. You are not even the outcome. You are the awareness behind it all, the chooser of all things, the silent observer who says I am, and watches the world rearrange in response. This is your true identity, not the roles you play, not the masks you wear, but the one who knows they are playing. You are not the creation. You are the creator. And the act of assumption is the act of God choosing to remember himself. You step into a state, and suddenly the world sings a new song. You shift your inner posture, and the mirror reflects a different face. And yet nothing changed but you, not your location, not the facts, not the timeline, just your dwelling place in consciousness. This is the infinite mercy of the law. You are always free to choose again. Feel this now, not as philosophy, but as presence. Right now in this breath, you can let go of any state. You can drop the cloak of fear, the name of lack, the mask of delay. You can enter the state of the one who has, the one who is, the one who remembers, and nothing outside of you can stop it. No past mistake, no outer resistance, no lingering doubt. You are the only gatekeeper. You are the only operant power. The door is always open to the state, you are willing to feel as real. And so the question becomes, not what do I want, but what am I willing to embody? What am I ready to live from, not visit occasionally, but abide in as truth? The world cannot deliver to you a state you do not claim. It cannot mirror what you refuse to reflect. But the moment you step fully into a new identity, with feeling, with acceptance, with stillness, the world rushes to comply. And this compliance is not reward, it is reflection. It is the mirror doing what it must. You are never asking for something to come. You are always asking yourself, who am I now? And the world answers with exact precision. This is the sacred dance of selection. You do not earn the new state. You do not qualify for it. You assume it. And in assuming it, you express the nature of God, the EM, that calls the things that are not seen as though they were, and watches them become. I am the Lord, and there is none else. You do not need another source. There is no outside cause. The only question is your assumption. The only movement is inner. The only change required is a shift of being. And that shift does not come through force. It comes through surrender, through relaxing into the state, not reaching for it, through letting it claim you, until there is no distance left between you and the thing you once desired. So you walk differently now. You think not of what you want, but from it. You carry the tone of fulfillment, not as an act, but as your new normal. And everything else, the people, the timing, the path bows to meet you there. And as this becomes your natural way of being, assumption not as a method, but as a rhythm, you begin to touch the edges of something even more mysterious. What if each state, each version of self, each world you have lived and forgotten, is not only available, but eternal? And if it is eternal, then what does it mean to die to one state, and resurrect in another? What if every assumption is a kind of death, and every fulfillment a holy rebirth? And if every assumption is a kind of death, then every fulfillment is a resurrection, not in the dramatic sense the world imagines, but in the quiet turning of identity, a subtle exhale, a slipping off of the old self, and the rising of something new. You do not add the new state to your former self, you become it, and what was before must fall away. This is why assumption feels so gentle, and yet so final. You do not try to carry both lives. You let one die so the other may live. You die to being the one who needs. You die to being the one who waits. You die to being the one who waits. You die to being the one who wonders if it's possible. And in that death, the true self rises, the self for whom it is already done. Unless a grain of wheat fall into the ground, and die, it abideth alone. But if it die, it bringeth forth much fruit. The seed is not lost in the soil, it is transformed. So too is your identity, when buried in the soil of assumption. You let go of the old name, the old voice, the old logic, and you let the new self take root in silence. This is not a violent death. It is not forced. It is as natural as falling asleep and waking in a new dream. You drift into the feeling of the fulfilled, and find that the old thoughts no longer fit. The old reactions lose their flavor. The old version of you feels like a distant memory, not resisted, just released. And this is the secret beauty of the law. You do not need to fix the old self. You do not need to wrestle with the past. You simply stop feeding it. You stop identifying with it. You let it die through starvation, through your absence. The moment you choose to dwell in the new state, you become the resurrection. And the world, like Lazarus, hears the call, come forth. It may not happen all at once. The outer forms may lag behind, but the resurrection is not measured by appearances. It is measured by your inner certainty. And once that shift has occurred, once you've truly assumed the state, then the bridge must form, the echo must return, the new identity must gather itself into form. You walk through your days no longer waiting for something to happen. You walk as one already risen. You carry the fragrance of fulfillment. Others may not know what changed, but they feel it. Life responds not to your words, but to your tone, and the tone of the risen self cannot be faked. This is why you need not prove your assumption. You need not announce it or explain it. You need only be. The new self carries its own evidence. It speaks with calm. It acts with clarity. It no longer negotiates with doubt. And when the old self tries to return, through thought, through memory, through outer reflections, you do not fight it. You simply say within, that is no longer me. And like a shadow at dawn, it disappears. This is the practice of resurrection, not a moment, but a way, a daily death to the former version, and a gentle rising into the truth of who you are now. You do not resurrect the desire, you resurrect the self, for whom the desire is already reality, and this self is not far, it has always been here, waiting behind the veil of assumption, behind the mask of effort, behind the illusion of time. You reach it not by struggle, but by surrender. So surrender now, not to circumstances, but to your own divine identity. Let the old thoughts die, let the old story die, let the old state fall away without resistance. You are not losing anything real, you are returning to what you never truly left. And as you live this way, dying daily to the lesser self, rising into the fulfilled one, something even deeper begins to whisper through the silence. If resurrection is always available, if every assumption is a portal, then what is this world, truly, but a field of sleeping gods, each dreaming their next becoming? And if this world is but a field of sleeping gods, then every face you see is not a stranger, but a reflection of divinity, still cloaked in dreams, each one wandering through their roles, believing themselves bound by time, by past, by circumstance, but beneath their words, beneath their fears, beneath the noise, the same light flickers, the same I am breathes, the same holy power waits to be stirred. You have walked among them, perhaps still do, not knowing your own name, forgetting that you are the dreamer, and not the dream. But something changed, a memory stirred, a desire whispered, and in that whisper, the seed of remembrance was planted. The desire was not to get something, it was the first flicker of awakening, a stirring of the soul beneath the sleep, saying, there is more, there is another way to live, there is another self to be. And in assuming that self, not just imagining it, not just touching it once, but dwelling in it, you began the process of resurrection. You woke, and in waking, you remembered the world was never separate from you, it only looked that way through the veil of sleep. This is why you must not curse appearances. They are not evidence of reality, they are evidence of former states, old echoes, fading dreams. What you see now is the projection of who you once believed yourself to be. And who you now believe yourself to be is the author of what comes next. Feel the gentleness of that truth. There is no blame in it, no shame, only the law, perfect and impersonal, like the sun shining on all. You are not being judged, you are being mirrored. And now, the mirror changes, not because the world is different, but because the one gazing into it has changed. You no longer ask the mirror to smile first. You smile, and the reflection follows. You assume, and the world obeys. This is the law in motion, as within, so without. So let every encounter be holy now, every conversation, every delay, every passerby. See them not as obstacles, but as actors playing out the residue of past states, or more beautifully, as fellow dreamers, waiting to be stirred. Your state moves them, your assumption awakens them. This is why inner transformation must always come first. You do not fix the world by arguing with it. You fix it by shifting the self who beholds it, and as you do, the world reshapes with seamless grace. You do not need to explain it. You do not need to teach it. You only need to be it. The risen self carries a frequency that speaks beyond words. Others feel it before they understand it. They soften without knowing why. They respond as if drawn by an invisible current. Because they are. You have become the operant power, not in pride, but in remembrance, not to control others, but to create peace, and your peace is contagious. Let this knowing settle into your chest, like breath returning to its rhythm. You are no longer at the mercy of the world. You are no longer at the mercy of the world. You are no longer seeking from the outside in. You are creating from the inside out, from the center of being, from the root of identity, from the holy place within you, that never forgets it is God in motion. And as you walk in this remembrance, you begin to see the entire world differently, not as chaotic, not as random, but as sacred choreography, perfectly ordered, perfectly timed. Every delay a realignment, every setback a recentering, every unanswered prayer a whisper, go deeper, live more fully in the end. And when you do, when you return again and again to the stillness of the fulfilled self, the world will bloom around you, not all at once, not always loudly, but surely, inevitably, lovingly, because assumption is not asking the world to change. It is the realization that the world has never been separate from the one who dreams it.
And if that dreamer is awake within you now, then what else is possible when you no longer forget your name? When you live not to prove, not to manifest, not to strive, but simply to express the fullness of the I am. And when you live simply to express the fullness of the I am, you no longer cling to outcomes as proof of your power. The fruit may come, but it no longer defines you. The answered prayer may bloom, but it no longer names you. You do not measure your divinity by the form, but by the feeling, and the feeling is steady, rich, complete, even in silence. The self that remembers its origin no longer counts manifestations like trophies. It does not need to. It knows that all things are added, naturally, inevitably, to the one who lives in the state, not because they are demanded, but because they are natural extensions of being. To live in the end is not to rush toward the result. It is to walk slowly through the garden of already. It is to breathe as one for whom the good is ordinary, for whom the desire has dissolved into identity, for whom every unfolding moment is a reflection of inner truth. This is why assumption, when fully lived, feels so peaceful, so quiet, not urgent, not dramatic, but deeply still. There is no proving in it, no convincing, only knowing. You no longer look for confirmation, you look from confirmation, and when you slip, for you will, when doubt enters like a whisper, when the old voice returns, when the world shows its former shape, you do not panic, you pause, you breathe, and you return, not to effort, but to awareness. That is not who I am now, and in that gentle return, you resurrect the state. You are not failing when you forget. You are learning to remember more quickly. You are shortening the distance between descent and rising. You are becoming fluent in your true tongue, the language of the fulfilled self. This is the quiet mastery, not controlling the world, but embodying the one who no longer needs to. And here, in this posture of grace, something else becomes possible, something few recognize, until it begins happening through them. You start to assume for others, not as manipulation, not as force, but as love. You see them as they have not yet dared to see themselves. You hold them in a state they have not yet claimed. And because you now know that all is self pushed out, your assumption of them is not an opinion, it is a creative act. You imagine them healed, and healing begins. You imagine them prospering, and doors open. You imagine them free, and the chains begin to fall. You are not interfering with their will, for their true will is freedom. You are not imposing, you are inviting. You are offering a higher vision, one born of your own union with the I am, and in that vision, they are lifted. This is the deeper dimension of the law, its use not merely for self, but for the whole, for the world, for the sleeping gods who pass you on the street, and do not yet know they are dreaming. You assume lovingly, silently, reverently, and the world by law rises to meet it. But it can only do so if you no longer need the outcome to define you, if you are already rooted in the end, if you give without seeking return, and imagine without needing applause. This is when assumption becomes holy, when it ceases to be a technique, and becomes your nature, when you no longer ask if it works, because you are no longer the one who doubts. You have become the assumption itself, living, breathing, unshaken, and in this stillness, this sweet forgetting of effort, a new current begins to flow beneath the surface, a question not from the mind, but from the soul. If all are one, and imagination is the only reality, then what is this I am, that we all share? Who is the dreamer behind every dream? And that question, who is the dreamer behind every dream, does not echo in the mind alone, it stirs the very fabric of your being. It is not asked with urgency, but with awe, not to understand, but to remember, for it is a question that answers itself in silence. The I am is not a thought, it is not a name, it is not a role you step into and out of, it is the still awareness behind every face, every form, every flicker of becoming. It is the root of consciousness itself, untouched, unmoved, eternal. It is not yours alone, it is not separate in each, it is shared. One I am, dreaming itself into infinite masks, playing out infinite states, waking up by degrees, through the lives it imagines. When you say I am, it is not the personal self speaking, it is the infinite self assuming form. This is the true source of all assumption, not the mind choosing a scene, but the I am choosing identity, and that identity gives birth to world. You are not imagining as a fragment, you are not selecting from limitation, you are God, dreaming yourself into form. choosing which version of self you will be now, and letting the world reflect it like glass in sunlight. When you assumed wealth, it was not for money, it was to remember abundance lives in you. When you assumed love, it was not to be chosen by another, it was to remember that the one you sought was always your own reflection, wearing another name. When you assumed healing, it was not to repair the body, it was to remember that life itself flows from the I am, whole, untouched, unbroken. The world will always seem outside, until you feel the center within, and once you find that center, once you feel the still flame of I am, everything else reorients. You no longer walk in reaction, you walk in radiance. The bridge forms not from force but from being. The mirror shifts not through effort, but through identity. And this identity, this God self you now remember, is not distant or difficult. It is the most familiar part of you, the part that was never born, and can never die. This is why assumption works, because it is not fantasy, it is the movement of being. You shift within, and the outer must follow, because there is no outer, there is only consciousness clothed in time and space. Feel that now, feel the dissolving of distance, the collapsing of questions, the still, sacred clarity that you are not on a journey to find truth, you are the truth unfolding. You do not need to become divine, you are divine, becoming visible. This is the heart of all manifestation, not to get, but to awaken, to assume not for gain, but for remembrance. You are not changing the world, you are revealing it. The fulfilled world has always existed, it appears only when you step into the state that sees it, and when you truly see it, you understand why there is no resistance, no opposition, only contrast, only the shadow of former states, lingering as you fully embody the new. The darkness is not punishment, it is simply the absence of assumed light. So speak gently now, walk slowly, let your assumptions arise not from panic, but from peace, from the place where the I am rests in knowing. You do not command the world, you call it forth by being, and what you are in truth is limitless. This is not the end of the journey, it is the awakening from the dream of distance, it is the soft lifting of the veil, between me and God, between here and there. There is only now, there is only this breath, there is only the I am, expressing, assuming, unfolding. And if this is true, if you are the eternal self dreaming itself into every scene, then what else might be waiting in the silence, just beyond the next assumption? What new world is even now forming beneath the still surface of your awareness? And if a new world is even now forming beneath the still surface of your awareness, then you must understand, this forming is not future, it is not becoming, it is already finished. It waits, not for time, not for proof, not for the right set of outer circumstances, it waits only for your permission to be seen. This is why assumption is not creation, but selection. Creation is finished. From the beginning, the harvest is already ripened. The only work is to align, to assume the end, and dwell there, without wavering, and in that dwelling, the invisible world responds, but not because you summoned something new, because you finally tuned your inner eye to behold what was always here. You are not drawing the future toward you, you are stepping into a state that was eternally available. A new scene opens not because it's being written, but because it's being remembered. Consciousness does not invent, it recalls every version of you, every outcome, every path. Alive now in imagination, waiting to be occupied. This is what it means to live in the end. You don't walk toward the desire, you walk from it, as the one who already received, already became, already is. And when you do, the path is not constructed, it is revealed. The bridge of incidents does not create the result, it lifts the veil between who you thought you were and who you already are. You need not force this, you need not figure it out, you only need to hold the tone, the state, the self-concept that reflects your chosen end, and the world will reconfigure, sometimes subtly, sometimes swiftly, but always with divine precision. So much of manifestation feels like waiting, but waiting is only the time it takes to fully inhabit the new state. The delay is not in the world, it is in your identification. When the assumption becomes natural, when it feels ordinary, familiar, even forgettable, that's when the world bends without effort, because the law never fails. The law is simply, you become what you assume, and so, the sacred responsibility returns, not to work harder, not to think more, but to assume more purely, more faithfully, more continuously, to let go of the question, when will it come, and instead ask, who am I now? That question opens the door, for the world is not responding to your words, but to your being. It reflects not what you speak, but what you are. When no one is watching, in the quiet, in the breath, in the still chamber of the heart, so feel now the weightlessness of surrender. You are not waiting, you are remembering, you are not seeking, you are selecting, you are not commanding, you are allowing the already real to reveal itself through your felt knowing, and as you rest in that knowing, as you saturate your mind with the tone of fulfillment, something begins to rise within you, not just trust in the process, but awe at the simplicity of it, the elegance of it, the love behind it. For what is this law, if not love made visible? It never condemns, it never punishes, it does not react emotionally to your thoughts, or judge your former assumptions. It simply mirrors, patiently, lovingly, infinitely. You could wander for decades, and the moment you return to the end, the law responds, not because you earned it, but because that is what love does. You are loved into being every moment. You assume, and the world replies, as you wish. So choose the wish carefully, not with fear, but with reverence, for what you dwell in becomes your world. And if that is true, if your assumption becomes your experience, then what becomes possible when you assume not just outcomes, but oneness? What becomes possible when you assume that nothing can be missing, because you already are all that you seek?
And if you already are all that you seek, then desire itself begins to transform. It no longer cries out as something distant. It becomes a whisper from within, a soft reminder of what is already planted in the unseen, waiting for your consent to bloom. The desire no longer speaks of lack. It speaks of memory. It stirs not from emptiness, but from the quiet knowing that fulfillment already belongs to you. And in that shift, when wanting becomes remembering, you step into the purest form of oneness. You are not separate from the good you imagine. You are not walking toward it across some uncertain bridge. You are the place it already lives. The only veil between you and the experience is the thought that it lies elsewhere. But what if nothing is elsewhere? What if the entire structure of reality is not built in layers, but in levels of awareness, states of consciousness you enter not by travel, but by assumption? Then all that's required is this: to assume your unity with the thing you thought was apart. To assume the love you thought you had to earn is already within your being. To assume the wealth you once believed was far off is simply the reflection of an inner richness made visible. To assume the peace you sought through changing the world is the stillness at your center, needing only to be remembered. You don't have to get anything. You only have to stop disbelieving that it's yours. You only have to stop standing at the gate, asking to be let in, not realizing you were already in the garden all along. And when you do, when you assume this sacred unity, this perfect union between self and fulfillment, something extraordinary begins to happen. Not in thunder, but in grace. Not in flash, but in stillness. The world becomes weightless. Time softens. Struggle dissolves. You no longer approach assumption with effort. You no longer attempt to feel it real. You live in it, naturally, quietly. As you would breathe, as you would walk, as you would sleep. It becomes your resting place, not your performance. And that resting place is the fulfillment itself. This is the mystery of living in the end, that the assumption of the thing replaces the need for its arrival. And in that replacement, the arrival becomes inevitable, because the law is always this: your world is yourself made visible. No need to rush, no need to prove, no need to strain. You are not separate from what you seek. You are simply choosing now to remember it, to clothe it in consciousness, and to walk in it as though it had already appeared, because in truth it has. And now the world rearranges, not to bring it to you, but to remove everything that once obscured the vision. You don't manifest to become worthy. You manifest because you already are. You assume because it is natural for the divine to express. You live in the end, because the beginning was never truly separate from it. And this oneness, this union between the seen and the unseen, between the dream and the dreamer, begins to extend itself, not just into what you manifest, but into who you perceive, how you love, how you listen, how you forgive. You begin to see the world not as broken, not as resistant, but as reflections of varying degrees of awakening, all arising from the same I am, and that I am is you. So the question is no longer, Will it happen? The question becomes, am I willing to live as one with it? Not someday, not when it shows up, but now. And if the answer is yes, if even now, you are willing to dwell in the oneness of fulfillment, then what might unfold when assumption is no longer a means to an end, but the expression of the end already known? And when assumption becomes the expression of the end already known, life no longer feels like a quest, it becomes a return, gentle, whole, and profoundly still. You are no longer climbing mountains to reach something beyond you. You are walking quietly into what has always been waiting, just behind the veil of your next breath. It isn't loud, it isn't rushed, it is soft like a memory remembered in perfect peace. To live from the end is to live from eternity. It is to walk through a temporal world, carrying the frequency of the finished. Nothing to chase, nothing to prove, only the unfolding of what was already given in imagination, now echoing itself into form. And here even the desire you once felt begins to take on new meaning. It is not a signal of lack, it is a breadcrumb from the version of you who already holds it. A call across the folds of awareness, saying, come this way, step into me, I already exist. This is the mystery most overlooked, that desire itself is evidence. It does not arise randomly. It is the movement of God within, reminding you of a state you once touched, perhaps long ago, perhaps in another form, but it is yours, already chosen, already complete. And when you assume it, not just think it, not just say it, but feel it as the root of your being, then the illusion of distance dissolves. You no longer look forward, you look from. You no longer pray for arrival, you give thanks from the arrival. Gratitude becomes natural, not forced, not ritual, but spontaneous. You feel it rising from within, not as a practice, but as a symptom, a byproduct of remembering. Yes, this is who I am, and the world ever faithful responds. It may not change all at once, it may not thunder with evidence, but it will begin to lean toward you, to shape itself around your new stance, to yield the fruit of your inner roots, because the law is precise. It is not personal, yet it is intimate. It is not emotional, yet it is deeply loving. It does not punish or reward, it mirrors. And you are no longer asking it to reflect what you do not believe. You are assuming your reflection is already true, and it is. You begin to realize that nothing you imagine is too good to be true, because truth is not determined by facts. It is determined by faith. Faith is not hope. Faith is the felt conviction of being. When you walk in faith, you walk in the invisible, as if it were the visible, and in doing so the visible appears. You do not need the world's permission. You do not need its applause. You do not need proof before you move. You move because your inner world has already shifted, and now the outer is simply catching up. This is the deep stillness of assumption, that what once felt like an effortful act, now becomes a state of rest, not passivity, not inaction, but an unshakable calm that no longer reaches, no longer clutches, no longer waits. It abides, and in that abiding, you may begin to feel a deep and wordless joy, not happiness from conditions, not excitement for what's to come, but joy pure, undisturbed, foundational. It is the joy of alignment, the joy of knowing you are no longer pretending to be who you are. You are no longer visiting the state. You are dwelling in it, living as it, speaking from it. And this is the moment the world starts to become soft. Events begin to flow toward you without your reach. People speak the words you once imagined. Circumstances shift without announcement, and you smile, not with surprise, but with recognition. Of course, this is what always follows assumption. This is what always follows assumption. This is what always follows rest. But even as the world begins to change, even as the harvest forms in visible ways, another invitation rises, deeper than manifestation, deeper than desire fulfilled. If you can assume anything, if all states are eternally present, then what happens when you no longer assume just for outcomes, but from your highest self? What unfolds when the one you assume is God? And when the one you assume is God, the entire tone of existence shifts. You are no longer a being trying to use divine law. You are divine law in form, remembering itself through every breath, every step, every unfolding moment. You no longer reach for heaven, you speak from it. This is the highest assumption, not of outcomes, but of identity. To assume the nature of God is not arrogance, it is obedience to the truth, whispered since the beginning. Be ye perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. Not someday, now, not through effort, through awareness. For what is God but the source, the awareness, the imagination that brings all things into being? And where does that awareness live? if not in you. You say I am, and you create. You feel and the world takes shape. You dwell in a state, and the mirror complies, not because of your personality, not because of your past, but because of your being. This is what the world forgets, that God is not outside. God is not a distant authority. God is your own I am, quietly forming every experience through the states you dare to claim. There is no intermediary, no distance, no delay. The moment you assume from that truth, the world cannot help but rearrange. To assume as God is to speak with authority, but never noise. It is to command through stillness, to create not with pressure, but with peace. The fulfilled self does not strain, it knows. You become like the light, not forcing the shadows to flee, but shining until they dissolve. And in this light, you walk through the world with a different rhythm, not above others, not separate, but seeing through every mask, every face, every stranger, the same flame you carry, the same I am, asleep or stirring. You do not argue with appearances, you look past them, you speak to the unseen truth in all things. This is divine sight, and the world responds, not always because you affirm, but because you no longer contradict. You live without friction, without the inner denial that once delayed the outer reflection. To live from this state is not to perform holiness, it is to embody truth, quietly, naturally, without effort. You become the vibration of the answered prayer. You do not speak about it, you radiate it, and others feel it without understanding why. This is the hidden radiance of assumption. When you assume from God, you no longer visit peace, you are peace. You no longer ask for love, you are love. You no longer visualize abundance, you express abundance through every thought, gesture, word and breath. And because you are no longer separate from what you assumed, the world no longer withholds it. There is nothing to wait for, nothing to unlock, just the ongoing revelation of what you have already accepted as true of yourself. And yet, the simplicity of this may cause the mind to protest. Can it really be this effortless, this quiet, this available? But you do not answer from the mind, you answer from the deep knowing. Yes, it has always been this simple, this still, this near. The veil was never external, it was thought. The separation was never real, it was belief. And now as you rest in this assumption of divine identity, something beyond words begins to rise. A new desire, not to create, but to commune, not to manifest, but to merge. You no longer just want things to happen. You want to dwell in union with the one who makes all things. And that union begins not in striving, but in silence. So what unfolds when assumption becomes not a step towards something, but the resting place of the soul, in the one who already is all? What arises in a life lived not for results, but for remembrance of divine being, here and now? And what arises in a life lived for remembrance, not results, is something the world cannot measure. It is not loud, it is not celebrated, but it is holy. It is the quiet flowering of the soul. It is the breath that needs no permission. It is the peace that no circumstance can touch. You begin to notice it in the small moments, not as dramatic change, but as a shift in your very being. You feel less urgency, less resistance, less noise inside. Even the desires that once carried tension begin to soften, not because they no longer matter, but because they no longer define you. You are not here to acquire, you are here to express. You are not here to convince reality, you are here to radiate truth. And the truth is, you have always been what you seek. So now assumption becomes your sanctuary, a sacred place, not a strategy. You dwell in the end not to get, but to abide, to rest in the finished work of creation, to say within yourself, it is done, and let that be enough. And because it is enough, the world yields. You begin to see through the illusion of effort, not the kind of movement that arises from joy or purpose, but the frantic energy that comes from forgetting your identity. The world has taught you that you must do in order to be, but the law of consciousness says the opposite. Be still, and know that I am God. Be still, and the doing will arise from being, not the other way around. And this stillness, it is not stagnation, it is power, it is clarity. It is the presence of assumption held so deeply, so gently, that even before the world agrees, your heart is unmoved. This is how creation unfolds, not as a result of striving, but as the echo of identity. The end follows the assumption, not because you force it, but because law cannot do otherwise. So you no longer react, you revise. You no longer plead, you position. You do not chase the world, you select the self, and let the world come find you there. And in this posture of peace,
What was once called manifestation becomes natural. You assume health, and the body aligns. You assume love, and the heart is met. You assume clarity, and the next step reveals itself without strain. But even more than these fruits, something deeper begins to take root, a devotion, a reverence, a relationship not with form, but with the formless, not with what comes and goes, but with the silent eternal presence from which all things arise. You are no longer living from the outside in. You are living from the kingdom, and the kingdom is within. You touch this in the quiet moments, in the gentle inner shifts, in the simplicity of breathing from fulfillment rather than reaching for it. You feel the divine not as something to summon, but as something always here. And when you forget, as you sometimes will, you do not fall. You return, not with guilt, not with worry, with grace. The moment you remember your identity, the world begins, once again, to mirror it. It has no memory of the old, unless you call it back. This is the mercy of the law, that every moment is a fresh creation, that time is not your jailer, that nothing is final, but your assumption. And when you live this way, not just knowing the law, but becoming it, you begin to realize that assumption is not a technique to use. It is a way of being, a constant communion with the end, a steady alignment with the truth that nothing is denied to the one who lives as if it were already so. And if this is your true state, if your world reflects not what you deserve, but what you dare to dwell in, then what becomes possible when you choose, again and again, to remain in the stillness of already having? What becomes real when you no longer wait, but walk as the one who was never lacking? And what becomes real when you no longer wait, but walk as the one who was never lacking, is the quiet wonder of a life lived from wholeness, not just spoken of, but embodied, not a concept in the mind, but a felt frequency humming beneath your every step. You are no longer rehearsing completion, you are it. This is the true meaning of fulfillment, not the arrival of a thing, but the disappearance of the sense that anything is missing. The world no longer feels like a test. It becomes a mirror, soft, responsive, always willing to show you who you are choosing to be. You begin to notice the subtleties. Things don't just happen to you, they unfold through you. Conversations change tone, circumstances realign, not because you forced them, but because you stopped contradicting yourself in consciousness. You are no longer living between two selves, the one who wants, and the one who has. You are only the one who is. And this new stability is not made of effort, it is made of rest. You rest in the identity you've chosen. You stop checking for signs. You stop measuring distance. You stop wondering if it's working. Because when you know something is yours, you don't search for proof. You act from possession. This is the unseen shift. The world never teaches that reality responds not to need, but to nature. The nature you dwell in, the identity you wear in silence, the tone you carry when no one is watching. This is the soil from which all things rise. And so you become intentional with the inner tone, not anxious, not obsessive, intentional, gentle, watchful. You notice when your inner speech contradicts your desired state, and you redirect, not in fear, but in faith. That's not who I am now. And just like that, the atmosphere within you shifts. You return, again and again, to the feeling of already. You return because it is home. You return because it is the only place where the world bends to meet you in peace. You return not to get something. You return because you've remembered where your power lives. And what begins to unfold is not just change, it is transformation. Not just better circumstances, but a different you. A self who no longer flinches when the outer contradicts the inner. A self who no longer doubts in the face of silence. A self who knows that the word is planted in stillness, and grows without effort. For the seed shall be prosperous, the vine shall give her fruit, and the ground shall give her increase. Not by striving, by law, by alignment, by identity. You don't have to convince the vine to bear fruit. You don't have to prove to the ground that your seed is worthy. You only have to plant, to dwell, to remain. The vine does what it is designed to do. And you too, when you live in your true identity, must bear the reflection of that state. It is not reward, it is rhythm. And so you walk, not as one trying to become, but as one who already is. You no longer talk about what's coming. You speak from what has come. You carry the fragrance of the fulfilled even before the form appears, because the form is only the echo. The fulfillment is you. And yet in this great peace, a subtle curiosity begins to form, a holy inquiry. If you can live from any state, if you can embody any version of self, then what does it mean to choose joy, when there is no reason to feel it, to assume light when the world is dark? What unfolds when you dare to assume the miraculous, not because circumstances suggest it, but because your being already knows it to be true? And what unfolds when you dare to assume the miraculous, without evidence, without confirmation, without even the suggestion of possibility, is the most sacred unfolding of all. You begin to live as light in the midst of shadow, not because the shadow has gone, but because you've remembered it was never the source. To assume joy, when there is no reason, that is power. To choose the state of fulfillment, while the world insists on delay, that is dominion. You are no longer matching the world, you are leading it. You are no longer asking circumstances for permission to feel blessed. You are assuming the blessing, and watching the outer fall in line. This is not delusion, it is alignment. You are no longer hypnotized by facts. You are governed by truth. The facts may shout, but the truth is still. The facts may change, but the truth is eternal. And that truth lives in you, not as theory, but as being. So now, you practice the miracle of assumption in the dark, not to deny what is seen, but to exalt what is known. You choose peace while the winds rage. You choose gratitude, while the field is still barren. You choose wholeness, while the evidence says otherwise. And that choice, that gentle, invisible, persistent choice, bends the world around it. The world is not looking for proof, it is looking for you to become the proof. And when you do, when you carry the vibration of what you've chosen as if it were already done, you become the bridge between the unseen and the seen. You are no longer waiting for signs, you are the sign. Others feel it. They can't explain it, but they sense it. Your calm, your certainty, your refusal to descend into reaction, your quiet joy in the middle of delay. These things are not surface, they are the ripple of someone who has moved beyond the illusion of cause and effect, and now lives as This is where the miraculous is born, not in spectacle, but in stillness, not in thunder, but in the whisper of the soul that knows who it is, and walks accordingly. You see, the miracle is not the thing arriving. The miracle is that you felt it before it did. The miracle is that you felt it before it did. The miracle is that you stayed in the end, when all else told you to turn back. The miracle is not the money, the healing, the call, or the door. The miracle is that you did not forget your name while you waited. That is what unlocks the unseen. And when it comes, when the world reflects back your unwavering stance, you will not be surprised. You will not shout. You will smile, softly, knowing this was always how it was going to be, because you already lived it, because you already carried it, because you already were it. So you walk this way now, as one who assumes not because they see, but because they are. You speak as if it were done, because in your world it is. You move with the grace of a fulfilled heart, not because of what is around you, but because of what is within you. And in that movement, you unlock something most will never touch: the power to choose joy as your dwelling place, not as a reaction, but as a state. Not as a result, but as a decision. For joy is not a product of circumstances, it is a symptom of alignment. The one who lives in the end has nothing left to fear, and in that fearlessness, joy rises, unprovoked, unshaken, unmistakable. And so as you rest in this truth, as you begin to live from the miraculous instead of longing for it, a new invitation begins to emerge, quiet and bold. If you can walk in the light before the dawn, then what else might you carry into the world simply by being it, before it appears?
And if you can carry it into the world simply by being it, then you are no longer waiting for transformation. You are the presence that transforms. Wherever you go, the atmosphere shifts, not because of what you do, but because of what you are. A silent current of knowing moves through you, changing what needs no announcement. This is the sacred path walked by the few who no longer seek evidence, but embody essence. You realize now that assumption is not for display. It is not a show of faith. It is private, quiet, and holy. You carry it inwardly like a seed planted deep in soil, invisible to others, yet charged with the inevitable. You do not rush it. You do not doubt it. You water it only with stillness and the simple phrase, "It is done." And because it is done, you no longer behave as if you are lacking. You stop arguing with appearances. You stop begging the mirror to change. You look out and see what once triggered you. And something remarkable happens. You feel no pull to react. Because you remember that what you see is not truth. It is echo. It is what was. and you are no longer living from what was. You are living from what is becoming. This is how assumption purifies the heart, not by asking you to be strong, but by asking you to remember. Remember who you are. Remember what you've chosen. Remember what you've already assumed in the inner sanctuary, where no eye can follow, but all creation must obey. You are not moved by delay. You are not confused by contrast. These things once made you question. Now they affirm. They show you that the old is fading, and the new is still forming. You feel the tension of the seed cracking open, not to destroy itself, but to release its design. And in the silence, the invisible becomes substance. You may not know how, you may not see when, but your knowing becomes a place you rest in, a room within your soul, where the outcome already lives. You visit it daily, not to make it happen, but to feel the truth of its presence. And slowly, you forget it was ever not so. This is how assumption becomes reality. It does not crash in, it unfolds, gently, naturally, sometimes so quietly that you do not notice until the thing you once longed for is now part of your rhythm. And you ask yourself, when did this become normal? When did the miracle become mundane? And the answer is always the same, the moment I lived from it. You see, the manifestation doesn't surprise the one who assumed, it confirms, it reflects, but it does not create belief, because belief came first. And now, the lines between assumption and truth begin to blur. You can no longer tell the difference between imagination and memory. You live from a place beyond time. The world calls it delusion, spirit calls it faith, and the law, the perfect impartial law, calls it creative command. For as he thinketh in his heart, so is he, not as he wants, not as he tries, as he thinketh in his heart. So you protect that inner thinking. You guard your assumptions the way a shepherd guards his flock, not in fear, but in reverence. You know that to assume is to create, and to dwell is to draw forth, and something even deeper begins to move within you. You realize that you are not only shaping your world, you are also shaping your identity. The more you live from the state, the more it lives through you. It stops being a role and becomes your nature. The line between the imagined self and the real self dissolves, and the question lingers, soft as breath. If you can change the world by assuming a state, then who do you become when you assume not just a condition, but a completely new name? And when you assume not just a condition, but a completely new name, the old garment begins to fall away. The self you once wore, stitched together by memory, fear, and repetition, loosens its grip. It does not fight, for it was only held in place by your agreement. And the moment you withdraw that agreement, it dissolves like mist in morning light. You no longer carry the identity that tried to earn, to prove, to persuade reality into blessing you. That self is no longer needed. It was a shadow, a stand-in for the true being within. The one who was never seeking, but simply waiting to be remembered. To take a new name is to accept a new nature. You begin to feel this shift, not as effort, but as ease. You wake with different thoughts, not because you're forcing them, but because you are being moved by a new rhythm. The assumptions you once had to practice now rise on their own. They've become part of the soil of your being. You notice you're not performing anymore. You're not pretending to be the one who has. You are the one who has. You're not reaching for the end. You are speaking from it. The air around you feels different, not because something has changed out there, but because you are no longer broadcasting lack, and so the world reflects wholeness. It must. This is the quiet law. The inner identity casts the outer shadow, always, not sometimes, not if the mood is right, always. When you assume a new name, I am free, I am favored, I am fulfilled, you are not speaking of something to come. You are declaring what already is, and what will unfold from it is not reward, but reflection. The world cannot help but echo the truth you are standing in. It is not a reward for doing the work, it is the mirror of your inner being. You walk differently now, not to convince anyone, not to dramatize transformation, but because something invisible has realigned. You no longer identify with struggle, with delay, with someday. You don't even speak in future tense. Your language softens into now. This is who I am. This is what I carry. This is where I live. And there is no pride in this, only reverence, because you remember that this power is not yours to control. It is you. The law does not serve the ego. It reveals the state you dwell in. So you do not command life. You align with life. You do not push against what is. You rest in what you've chosen, and in that resting, creation is stirred. You are now the embodiment of the Word made flesh, and the Word was made flesh, and dwelt among us, not through effort, but through assumption, through dwelling in the unseen long enough that it could no longer remain hidden, through wearing the identity until it no longer felt foreign, and so, the Word becomes you. The new name becomes nature. The assumed state becomes a new world. This is the real mystery, that you do not receive what you want. You receive who you are, and who you are is entirely up to you. And if this is true, if you can take on any name, wear any essence, breathe any reality into being, simply by dwelling in it without wavering, then what happens when you choose not just a better version of your old self, but an entirely new origin? What becomes of your world when you no longer identify with the one who came from lack, but the one who was never born of it to begin with? And when you no longer identify with the one who came from lack, something holy begins to unravel in silence. A veil lifts, not from the world, but from your perception of it. What was once seen through the lens of striving is now seen through the stillness of origin, the eternal place from which all being flows. You are not the effect of your past. You are not the result of memory, trauma, or the pattern of what was. You are not even the sum of your former beliefs. You are the beginning itself, the awareness that chose to descend into form, not to fix what was broken, but to reveal what was always whole. You do not need to improve what you are. You only need to awaken to it. You begin to feel this in the way your inner speech softens. You no longer correct yourself with force. You remind yourself with love. You no longer fight with the old thoughts. You allow them to pass through like smoke through a beam of light. The moment you remember your origin, the lie of limitation loses all weight. You were not born from fear. You descended into it to reclaim it. You came not to earn worth, but to demonstrate it. This is why assumption works, not because it manipulates the universe, but because it reveals your true placement within it. The universe is not something you work against, it is something you move through, like breath moving through lungs. You are no longer standing on the edge of becoming. You are standing in the center of being. You begin to understand that time is not your master, it is your servant. Delay is not a punishment, it is only the space required for what you have assumed to take form without fracture. The end is already planted. The rest is unfolding in grace. And in this remembrance, the burden lifts. You do not have to force the old to disappear. It fades on its own, when it is no longer fed. You do not have to shout the new into being. You only have to rest in its reality. The identity you now wear speaks silently into the world. I am not seeking. I am remembering. I am not reacting. I am radiating. You feel it even in your body. The ease, the openness, the groundedness of one who has returned home. The inner temple no longer feels like a place you visit. It is now where you live, and everything outside of you becomes an echo of that inner dwelling. You are not surprised by alignment. You are not shocked by favor. You are not humbled by goodness, because you no longer believe you were ever apart from it. This is the gentle fire of spiritual identity, that you are not becoming more. You are becoming known to yourself. The word that was planted in your being, before the world ever named you, is now rising, not with noise, but with clarity. You may remember the verse, "Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee, and before thou camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee." That knowing is what you now awaken into. You are not your history. You are not your family line. You are not your old self-concepts. You are the dreamer awakening within the dream, realizing that every character, every event, every limitation was your own divine play, until you were ready to stop acting and begin remembering. And so, what once felt like imagination now feels like prophecy. What once felt like pretending now feels like recognition. You walk the earth not as one who hopes, but as one who knows, and in that knowing, something deeper calls. Not a desire for more things, but a desire for more things, but a desire to walk in complete union with your true nature. Not to have, but to become the full revelation of what you've already assumed. And the question arises in sacred stillness, if all of this springs from who you believe you are, then what happens when your every assumption points not to a version of self, but to the divine I am itself? And what unfolds when your every assumption points to the I am itself is no longer personal transformation, but divine embodiment. You are no longer clothing yourself in improved versions of the old man. You are stepping entirely out of time's fiction and standing in the eternal reality of your nature. You begin to sense it not as concept, but as current.
There is a hum in your silence now, a still fire behind your gaze. You are not someone who uses the law. You are the law remembering itself. You are not manifesting things. You are revealing states, releasing echoes of the eternal into time-bound frames. You speak now from the mountaintop, though your feet never moved. The journey was never outward, it was always an ascent within, and now you look upon your life not as a series of events, but as reflections of the name you dared to claim. When you say I am without adding fear, doubt or delay, you are speaking with the voice that parted light from darkness. You are speaking with the name that is the beginning. There is no middleman, there is no gap, no delay between word and form, except what you allow by forgetting, and so you live gently, in reverence, not because life is fragile, but because it is sacred. You no longer try to fix or control, you allow the assumption to do the work. You no longer need to prove your worth, or explain your peace. You walk, and the waters part. You speak, and the stone breaks. You assume, and the world rearranges. There is no need to rush. The seed does not beg the soil to bloom. It rests in stillness, in quiet, in invisible certainty. And just like that, the life within takes shape. Unseen, unforced, unmistakable. This is what happens after you assume, not fireworks, but alignment, not spectacle, but embodiment. And the more deeply you dwell in that assumption, the more you forget the world ever told you something else. You used to wait for confirmation, now you wait in communion. You used to ask, when will it come? Now you breathe, it is done. And in that breath, things shift. The phone rings, the door opens, the path clears, not because of effort, but because the vibration that once called it future now calls it present. You are not asking anymore, you are accepting, and in accepting, you begin to remember not only who you are, but who you've always been. The I behind the assumption, the source of the imaginer, is not a mind, or a name, or a story. It is not even a person, it is presence, the I am that had no beginning, and has no end. You assumed from this place once or twice before, perhaps in a moment of desperation or desire, but now, you are learning to live there, not visit, not borrow, not imitate, but abide. It is written, be still, and know that I am God. Not later, not when the prayer is answered, now. And now you understand, the invisible process of manifestation is not about making things appear. It is about allowing what is already complete to unfold in its perfect time, through your unwavering rest in the end. You are not separate from the thing you desire, you are the consciousness in which it already lives. And so, the outer must bow, the world must conform, but not because you commanded it with force, because you return to yourself, to the one who needs no sign, no permission. Still, something deeper calls. A gentle invitation arises from the silence. If assuming reveals the end, and the end reveals the truth, then what happens when you no longer assume to get, but assume to give birth to the divine in everything you touch? And when you assume not to gain, but to give birth to the divine in everything you behold, your entire relationship with creation softens. It no longer feels like a pursuit. It becomes participation, a holy exchange between the invisible and the visible, the dream and the dreamer, the seen and the source. The world is no longer something to conquer or fix. It is something to awaken through the gaze of your assumption. You are not changing people or circumstances anymore. You are calling forth the hidden truth within them by refusing to see them as anything less than God wrapped in form. Every encounter becomes a mirror. Every place you walk becomes sacred ground, not because it was made holy, but because you walked in remembering. You carry the end with you now. You wear the fulfillment, not on your sleeve, but in your breath. You don't need to speak it for it to be felt. Presence precedes words. Your inner state begins to move ahead of you, preparing the way without effort or interference. You find yourself no longer needing to defend your assumption. You are not proving anything. You are not correcting appearances with anger or frustration. Instead, there is a deep quiet within, a certainty so soft it cannot be shaken. You don't fight the illusions of the world. You outgrow them by assuming a reality so real that all else fades. And this is how the divine is born again and again through you. You assume peace, not to receive peace, but to reveal that it already is. You assume abundance, not to attract wealth, but to remind your world that lack is a lie. You assume love, not to fix relationships, but because your nature is union. This is what it means to live as the operant power, not that you control reality with will, but that your being becomes the womb of manifestation. You are no longer reacting to what is. You are responding to what already is true in consciousness, and consciousness, as always, is the only reality. You begin to realize that the law is never delayed, never distracted, never denied. It is exact, flawless, silent, and your assumption is its key. What you accept inwardly, without resistance, without condition, without question, that becomes the image reality must take on. The process remains invisible only to those who look outward, but to the one who abides in the end, the process is as clear as the moon pulling the tide. There is rhythm, there is unfolding, there is inevitability, and so you stop touching the seed. You stop asking if it's growing. You stop digging it up to check. You know what you planted. You know the soil you chose. You know the state you live in, and that knowing becomes your stillness. It is written, "The kingdom of God cometh not with observation, for behold, the kingdom of God is within you." So you no longer watch the world for proof. You watch your inner conversations. You dwell in the secret place, and you let the fruits appear when they must, and when they come, you do not gasp. You do not celebrate as if it were a surprise. You smile like one who simply recognizes the shape of what they have known in silence. You greet the form like an old friend. You remember now, you are not creating things. You are giving form to what has always been present in the invisible. You are molding the formless with your identity, and this identity is not a mask. It is a memory of the one you were before the world taught you otherwise. And even still, a gentler mystery approaches, not of what you can manifest, or who you can become, but of how deeply you can remember yourself as the one who never needed to assume at all. And when you begin to glimpse that sacred wonder, the remembrance of the one who never needed to assume, the veil thins entirely. You no longer stand on the threshold between man and God. You remember that the threshold was imagined, the separation, invented, the search, unnecessary. You are not climbing toward divinity. You are peeling away the layers that suggested you were ever apart from it, and beneath every layer, there is only light, still, whole, without effort, without lack, the light that shaped worlds before time spoke its first syllable, the light that says, "I am that I am." It was never about creating more, it was always about dissolving illusion, the illusion of delay, the illusion of distance, the illusion of earning. In the beginning was the Word, and that Word is still within you, vibrating as awareness. Every assumption, every vision, every imaginal act was never about acquiring something. It was the echo of the original Word, waking up inside your mind, calling you home. And now, it is no longer about the thing assumed, whether it be a home, a partner, healing, or a dream fulfilled. You hold it lightly, not because you do not care, but because you know it is already done. You know it was never the thing you truly longed for. It was the state that thing pointed to. And now you see the state is always available. The outer is just its shadow. You rest in the truth of being, not as practice, not as technique, but as nature. Your inner world becomes quiet, not silent from emptiness, but from completion. There is no battle left to fight, no identity to perform, no miracle to chase. The most miraculous thing has already happened. You have remembered who you are, and that remembrance now breathes through everything. You sit at the table, and abundance whispers through the glass. You walk through your city, and love wraps itself in strangers' faces. You hear music, and the notes carry the fragrance of eternity. You are not adding to the world, you are unveiling it. Every assumption made in love reveals more of what already is. You no longer ask, "Is it working?" because you see that it was you all along. You were the cause, you were the law, you were the proof. And now, you walk with grace, not with the pride of one who has mastered reality, but with the humility of one who knows that nothing was ever missing, nothing needed fixing, only remembering, only seeing. The invisible process of manifestation is no longer invisible to you. It is the rising tide of your own awareness meeting the shore of form. You trust it, you rest in it, and the more you rest, the more it moves. You let life be light again, not because everything is perfect on the surface, but because you know perfection was never found there. Perfection was the peace in the depth of your own being, the stillness behind the desire, the silence that shaped the vision. And when you lay down to sleep now, there is no more effort in your prayers, only thankfulness. You no longer beg, you no longer command, you remember, and that remembering opens the gates. You fall into that sacred sleep, not to escape, but to return. You let the curtain close on the waking world, knowing that in this quiet descent into the imaginal, you are not dreaming of what could be, you are resting in what already is. For truly, as it is written, He calleth those things which be not as though they were, and so do you. But now, not from lack, from love. You walk as one who knows, you live as one who is, and so the assumption fades into awareness, the practice dissolves into presence, the desire falls into completion, and the name I am becomes all that remains.